It wasn't the words that broke me at first. It was the timing. My son had just finished straightening his tie in the mirror. That old gold tie I'd bought him for his college graduation. The one he dug out specifically for this day because he said it reminded him of me, and he looked so much like his father in that moment that I had to press my lips together and look away before I started crying and ruined my mascara. That's when she said it. His mother-in-law, Harriet, standing not 3 feet from me, speaking loud enough for the whole bridal suite hallway to hear. Finally, a real family taking over. Lord knows this boy needed some mothering he didn't get. And then she laughed. That low, throaty laugh that I'd been hearing for 2 years and never once liked. The kind of laugh that isn't really a laugh at all, it's a verdict. My son Caleb went very still. I want you to understand something about Caleb before I tell you the rest of this. He is 31 years old. He is 6'1". He works as a structural engineer and has designed load-bearing frameworks for 3 buildings in this city that will probably stand longer than any of us will be alive. He is not a small man, and he is not a soft man. But the way he turned around in that hallway, slow and deliberate, with his eyes on me first and not on her, that's when I knew something had changed in him. Something had finally run out. He didn't say a word. Not yet. He just looked at me and said, quietly, "You okay, Mom?" I told him I was fine. I am 63 years old, and I have survived things that woman will never understand. So yes, I was fine, but my hands were shaking, and we both knew it. I need to back up, because if I just tell you what happened at that wedding, you won't understand how we got there. And I need you to understand how we got there. I raised Caleb alone from the time he was 9 years old. His father, my husband Raymond, died of a heart attack on a Tuesday morning in March. He was 41 years old. He was eating cereal at the kitchen table, and then he wasn't there anymore. That's how fast it happened. Caleb was in the next room watching cartoons. I heard the bowl hit the floor and I thought Raymond had dropped it by accident. I won't spend too long on that part because that grief is mine, and I've carried it long enough that it's become something I don't have to set down and examine anymore. It's just part of how I walk. But I want you to know it was real, and it was hard, and Caleb watched me navigate every single day of it. We didn't have much. Raymond had a small life insurance policy, enough to cover the funeral and keep us in the house for about 8 months if I was careful. Which I was. I went back to work full-time at the medical billing office where I'd been working part-time. I picked up weekend hours at a fabric store 2 towns over because the owner was a woman named Helen who didn't mind that I sometimes brought Caleb to sit in the back and do his homework while I ran the register. Helen passed a few years ago, and I still think about her kindness more than she ever knew. Caleb was not a difficult child. He was a quiet one, which is sometimes harder. He watched everything. He noticed when I was tired. He started making his own lunch in 4th grade, not because I asked him to, but because he saw me struggling to get his and mine both ready before 6:45 a.m. He would leave mine on the counter with a napkin folded underneath it. And every single morning I had to walk to my car before I let myself feel how much that meant to me, because if I started crying, I would be late. He was the first person in my family to go to college. He got a partial academic scholarship, and we covered the rest with loans and summer work and me picking up a 3rd job for 2 years that I don't like to think about because it wasn't pretty, but it was necessary. He graduated in 4 years with honors. He got his master's. He paid off his portion of the loans in 6 years, ahead of schedule. When I went to his pinning ceremony for his engineering license, I sat in that auditorium alone, and I clapped so hard my palms were red for an hour afterward. That is who raised Caleb. He met Bree about 3 years ago, through a friend of a friend at some rooftop thing in the city. He called me the following Sunday, he always calls on Sundays, and told me her name and that she worked in marketing and that she laughed at his terrible jokes, which I took as a good sign because his jokes really are terrible. I liked Bree in the beginning. She was quick, bright. She had strong opinions about things and wasn't afraid to say them, which I respected. She was also, I noticed fairly early on, deeply, fundamentally shaped by her mother, Harriet. I met Harriet at Thanksgiving about 4 months in. She came in wearing a coat I later found out cost more than my car payment and immediately began reorganizing the appetizer arrangement I'd spent an hour on. She didn't ask. She just did it, the way people do when they believe so fully in their own rightness that seeking permission doesn't occur to them. I just think it flows better this way, she said. I let it go. It was Thanksgiving and I was trying. Over the next 2 years, I let a lot of things go. The comments about my house being cozy in a tone that meant small, the time she referred to Caleb's upbringing as modest to someone at a birthday dinner and I was sitting right there, the way she called Caleb practically her second son to her friends while simultaneously making it clear she thought the first 18 years of his life were something to be overcome rather than celebrated. She never said anything directly cruel to me. That wasn't her style. Harriet was the kind of woman who used implication like a scalpel. You always left feeling slightly diminished and slightly uncertain about whether you had any right to feel that way. When Caleb and Bree got engaged, I cried happy tears in my kitchen at 11 o'clock at night with the television on and nobody watching it. My son was going to be happy. That was all I wanted. I did not anticipate what planning the wedding would cost me. I want to be clear about something. I was not trying to control anything. I know what it looks like when a mother-in-law inserts herself where she doesn't belong, and I made a deliberate choice not to be that woman. Bree's wedding. Bree's vision. My job was to show up in the right dress and cry at the right moments and be grateful I was included. What I did not expect was to be systematically excluded. It started small. The venue tour. First, Harriet mentioned she'd found several places to look at and had scheduled visits. She emailed Caleb and Bree the itinerary. My name was not on the email. When Caleb forwarded it to me, I noticed all 4 visits were on a Thursday, which was the day I covered the front desk at my church's Community Resource Center from 9 to 2. I'd been volunteering there for 11 years. I mentioned it once to Bree, gently. Asked if there was any flexibility on the timing. She said she'd check. She didn't get back to me. By the time I followed up, the venue was already booked. A Saturday tour that I could have attended without any issue. Nobody thought to offer it. This became the pattern. The cake tasting, a Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. I work until noon on Wednesdays. By the time I asked about a later slot, the decision had already been made. The florist consultation, a Tuesday, my physical therapy afternoon. I'd been going for my knee for 6 months. It wasn't optional. The rehearsal dinner planning call, 9 p.m. on a Sunday, which should have been fine, except Harriet changed it to 3 p.m. That afternoon was out telling anyone until 2 hours before. Caleb didn't know most of this was happening. That's important to say. He knew I'd missed some things, but the messaging he got was always, oh, we tried to work around everyone's schedule. It's just hard to coordinate. And that's true. Coordinating is hard, and Caleb trusted that people were trying. He's an engineer. He believes in systems working as intended if everyone does their part. I did not tell him how many parts had failed. What I did do was show up to everything I possibly could. I bought my dress without being invited to the shopping trip. A deep navy rack dress, because I asked Bree what color she preferred, and she said she didn't have a strong preference, and I took her at her word. I ordered my shoes online. I had my hair done the Friday before, and the woman who did it, Claudette, who has known me for 15 years, told me I looked beautiful, and I cried a little in her chair, and she pretended not to notice. I wrote Caleb a letter. 6 pages, handwritten. I sealed it and kept it in my purse because I thought I might give it to him before the ceremony. I wanted him to know, no matter what the next chapter looked like, that the years we had together, just the 2 of us in that house, him folding napkins under my lunch, me clapping until my hands went red, those years were not a gap in his story. They were the whole foundation of it. The morning of the wedding was a Saturday in September. The ceremony was at 2. I arrived at the venue, a converted estate house about 40 minutes outside the city, the kind of place with gravel paths and string lights that cost someone a great deal of money, at noon, as instructed. I was shown to a sitting room off the main hall, where I'd been told the family would gather before the ceremony. Harriet was already there with 3 of her sisters and her best friend and her sister's daughter, who I'd met once at the engagement party and whose name I could not remember. They were drinking mimosas and the energy in the room was a closed circle, pleasant enough on the surface, not an opening in it. I sat in a chair near the window. Someone handed me a mimosa. I held it and didn't drink it because my stomach was not cooperating. Caleb came through about 45 minutes before the ceremony to check on things. He was in his suit, the gold tie. He came straight to me, kissed my cheek, said I looked beautiful. I told him his tie was crooked and fixed it, the way I have been doing since he was 15 years old, wearing it to church, and he let me because he knows it's something I need. That's when Harriet said it. Finally, a real family taking over. Lord knows this boy needed some mothering he didn't get. And then the laugh. Caleb went still. One of Harriet's sisters made a small, uncomfortable sound. Bree was standing slightly behind her mother, and I have replayed this moment more times than I should. She pressed her lips together and looked away and did not say a word. And then she gave this small, almost imperceptible smile. Not at me, not at Caleb, just at the floor. The kind of smile that means you heard it, and you're not going to do anything about it. Caleb saw it too. Bree, he said. Not loud, calm. What's funny? She looked up. I didn't say anything. You smiled. The room had gone very quiet. Caleb, Harriet started. It was just a little. I'm not talking to you right now. He said it without heat, like a fact. He looked at Bree. I need you to tell me that wasn't funny to you. I need you to tell me that. Bree said, Caleb, can we not do this right now? It's literally what? Nobody spoke. He nodded, once, slowly. The way I have seen him nod when he reaches the end of his calculation and the numbers don't come out the way he'd hoped. But they are what they are, and he has to work with what's real. He looked at me. Mom, can you give me a minute? I stepped out. I went and stood in the hallway by a window that looked out over the gravel path, and I watched a woman in heels try to navigate the stones, and I thought about absolutely nothing for about 3 minutes, because that was all my brain could manage. Then Caleb came out. He stood next to me at the window. He put his arm around my shoulders and he said, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I told him not to be sorry. He hadn't done anything wrong. He said, I know. I mean, I'm sorry it happened to you. Not sorry for what I'm about to do. I looked at him. He said very quietly, I've been watching this for 2 years, Mom. I thought I was being patient. I think I was just not paying close enough attention to what was actually going on. I didn't ask what he was going to do. With Caleb, you don't ask questions when he has that look. You just make sure he's eaten recently and step out of the way. He went back inside. 15 minutes later, the wedding coordinator came to find me. She had the expression of someone who had been in this profession for many years and was not fully surprised, but was certainly not prepared. She said there had been a development and the ceremony was going to be postponed. Postponed. That was the word they used. I found out the full story in pieces over the following days. Caleb had gone back into that room and told Bree, with her mother and her aunts and her best friend all present, that he needed her to understand something clearly before they walked down any aisle. He said he needed her to tell him, right then, that what her mother had said was not acceptable to her, not I'll talk to her later, right then. He said the rest of his life with her depended on whether she could do that one thing. She had said that he was being dramatic, that her mother didn't mean anything by it, that he was ruining everything. He had said, okay. And then he had taken off his jacket, folded it over a chair, and told the coordinator he needed to speak to the officiant. The wedding did not happen that day. I drove home alone. I sat in my kitchen, in my navy dress with my shoes still on, and I put my hands flat on the table, and I breathed. I didn't call anyone. I didn't know what I would say. Caleb called me at 9 that night. He was at his apartment. He was calm in the way that people are calm after something very large has moved through them and settled. He said, I want to tell you something. I told him to tell me. He said, I found the letter. I had left my purse in the sitting room when I went to stand in the hallway. He had gone looking for me and found the purse and found the letter, half visible at the top. He'd recognized my handwriting on the envelope. He'd read it. He said, Mom, I knew you worked hard. I knew we went through a lot. But I didn't know. I didn't understand all of it. The fabric store. The third job. Helen. The lunch on the counter. His voice stopped for a moment. I remember doing that. I remember putting the napkin under it. I didn't know you knew. I told him of course I knew. He said, I should have said something a long time ago. I should have said it every Sunday. I told him he didn't need to say it. I didn't do any of it to be acknowledged. I did it because he was my son, and that was the whole reason. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, Harriet's family has been calling. Bree has been calling. She says she wants to fix it. She says she's sorry. She says her mom was out of line. I didn't say anything, he said. I told them I need time to understand what I saw today, because it wasn't just what her mother said, it was Bree's face, and I keep coming back to that. I understood that. I thought about that face too. What Caleb did the next morning was not dramatic. It was quiet, and it was thorough, and it was, in its way, the most like his father I have ever seen him. He called Bree. He told her he was not walking away from her forever, necessarily, but he was walking away from the engagement. He said the version of her that had stood in that room and smiled at the floor was not a version he could build a life alongside. He said if she was capable of understanding why, they could talk again someday. He said he wished her well. Then he called her mother. He did not wish her well. He told Harriet that the comment she had made was something he'd been documenting in a note on his phone for the past 2 years. Every implication, every small cruelty, every scheduling conflict that kept a certain person from being included. He said he wasn't going to do anything with that information except make sure she knew he had it. He said the next time she spoke about his mother, for any reason to any person, he would like her to remember that he is an engineer, and engineers are very, very good at keeping precise records. Harriet did not respond. He then called his own boss. He works in a firm, and as it happened, one of the firm's longtime municipal clients had a professional relationship with Harriet's husband's company. Caleb did not interfere with that relationship. He simply made sure his supervisor knew, in a matter-of-fact and entirely professional way, that he and the family would not be having any further personal dealings. He said it as information, not a complaint. That's the way Caleb does things. I found out about most of this later. He didn't tell me at the time because he didn't want me to feel responsible for any of it. I do feel responsible, but I also understand that he wasn't doing any of it for me. He was doing it because of what kind of man he decided to be a long time ago. In a house where the lunches were packed by 9:30 and the tie was always a little crooked and someone always fixed it, and that was enough. That was everything. It is 4 months later now. Caleb comes for Sunday dinner most weeks. He brought a friend last month. Someone from work, a quiet woman named Jo who looked at my photographs on the wall with real interest and asked good questions about Raymond and didn't try to fill every silence. I liked her. I didn't say so because it's too soon, but I liked her. He still wears the gold tie when there's something worth dressing up for. Last week, he called on a Sunday morning, which he doesn't usually do. Usually it's the afternoon. He said he just wanted to say something and didn't want to wait. He said, I figured it out. What I said in the letter. I said, what letter? Because I'd mostly let go of the fact that he'd read it. He said, the one you wrote. You said you hoped I knew that the years it was just us weren't a gap. You hoped I knew that years it was just us weren't a gap. You hoped I knew they were the foundation. I remembered. He said, I do know. I want you to know that I know. I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. I am 63 years old. I have outlasted grief that would have ended better women than me. I've worked 3 jobs and packed lunches in the dark and clapped until my hands went red and written 6 pages by hand that I wasn't sure I'd ever give to anyone. And I raised a man who, when it mattered most, looked at me first. That's the whole story. That's all of it. I've been sitting with this story for 4 months now, turning it over the way you turn over a stone you've been stepping around for years and finally decide to pick up and look at properly. What I keep coming back to is not the wedding, not Harriet's voice in that hallway, not Bree's face, not even the moment Caleb folded his jacket over that chair. What I keep coming back to is a Tuesday morning in 1998 when a 9-year-old boy walked into the kitchen and found his mother standing at the counter trying to make 2 lunches with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just picked up the bread and started spreading the peanut butter. And that, I think, is where the real story begins. There's something people get wrong about cause and effect. They look at a single moment, a man calling off a wedding, a son standing up in a room full of people, and they call that the story. But every visible thing has a long invisible history behind it. Caleb didn't stand up in that hallway because he was angry. He stood up because 22 years of watching his mother work third jobs and pack lunches in the dark and clap until her palms went red had built in him a set of values so solid that when something violated them, his whole system recognized it. Not emotionally, structurally, the way a building knows when a load-bearing wall is being compromised. That's not luck. That's not temperament. That's the result of what I chose to show him every single ordinary day about what a person owes to the people they love. I won't pretend I wasn't scared to raise a child alone. I was terrified most of the time, but I decided early that whatever I couldn't give Caleb in terms of ease or money or two-parent stability, I was going to give him in terms of honesty and follow-through. I was going to do what I said I would do. I was going to show up. I was going to let him watch me fail and keep going, because I thought that was more useful to him than pretending I never failed at all. I think I was right about that. Not because of the wedding. Because of the phone call 4 months later, on a Sunday morning, when he told me he knew that the years were the foundation, that he understood. Harriet built something too in her way. She built a daughter who learned that cruelty with a smile is acceptable, that other people's invisible labor doesn't count, that implication is safer than honesty. And Bree stood in that hallway and smiled at the floor, and that smile was also the result of long, careful construction. What you build in a child, they will carry. The question is never whether it will matter. The question is only what it will matter for. I am 63 years old. I have earned the right to say plainly, character is not something that appears when the stakes are high. It is something that is assembled, quietly, over decades of small choices that nobody is watching and nobody is grading. Caleb's character was assembled in a house where the electricity sometimes ran tight and the vacations were state parks, and the college fund was a second job at a fabric store 2 towns over. Harriet's daughter's character was assembled somewhere else entirely. And on a Saturday in September, both of those assemblies were on full display. I don't feel triumphant about any of it. I feel tired and grateful, and a little bit undone by the fact that my son read 6 handwritten pages and called me on a Sunday morning to say he knew. That's enough. That has always been enough.